Hello there, you're watching the Press Preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half hour, we're going to be seeing what's making the headlines with Owen Bennett, Deputy Political Editor of the HuffPost UK, and Kate Andrews, News Editor at the Institute of Economic Affairs. So welcome to both of you. Let's take a look then at what's on those front pages. And the Financial Times leads with the PM's new pledge to embrace ideas from Labour and other rival parties. The Telegraph follows suit, calling it a cry for help to Jeremy Corbyn to deliver Brexit. The Guardian says the invitation to Labour is unprecedented and a clear attempt by Theresa May to bolster her precarious position. But the PM claims that she has an unshakable sense of purpose. That's in the I newspaper. The Times is calling it the Prime Minister's fight back amid a looming leadership challenge. We can't show you that at the moment. I might be able to show you that front page in just a second, though. The Metro, meanwhile, leads on the case of Charlie Gard and his parents' latest plea for their baby to undergo experimental treatment in the US. And the Mail does the same ahead of tomorrow's High Court hearing. The emotional plea from Charlie's parents also leads the Mirror. They say their son deserves a chance at what they've called miracle treatment. That's in The Sun. And the Express reports on a new weapon to fight diabetes, a smartphone app that measures blood glucose levels. So lots to talk about there with Owen Bennett, Deputy Political Editor of the HuffPost UK, and Kate Andrews, News Editor at the Institute of Economic Affairs.
You got it, yeah.
Sorry, I made a right mouthful of that. Anyway, welcome properly to both of you. So a number of the front pages talking about Theresa May, who's going to make a speech on Tuesday, we're told. Some are describing it as a bit of a relaunch of her leadership, but what is it exactly that she's going to say? Let's take a look at The Guardian first of all.
So the Prime Minister is apparently going to launch into a speech calling on other members of Parliament, specifically looking at Labour, to bring forward, she says, their own views and ideas, really trying to show that she is reaching across the aisle, I suppose, and that Brexit needs to be in unison, that it can't just be one party leading this. Obviously, this is a reflection on the snap election, which did not pan out in her favour. I think that this kind of speech shows that her power is very diminished, especially when it comes to these Brexit negotiations. I think it shows weakness, but if I have a bit of an optimistic slant on it as well, it's an interesting game that she's playing. Labour, I think, has gotten away in many ways with not having to fully come out on their position with Brexit, especially Jeremy Corbyn, who we knew was very much holding back a lot of the views that we thought he might have when it came to Brexit, a reluctant Remainer, if you will. So asking them to come forward with positivity and their own views puts them on the spot to offer up decisions so in some kind of bipartisan manner things can move forward. And
I'm just going to show the Times because we weren't able to show it in our introduction, our list of papers. So there it is, and they refer to that position of weakness, as you put it. Weakened May pleads for support from rivals. Owen, what do you make of this?
I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious that 8, 9,
laugh
10,
out loud.
Yeah. 10 weeks ago, she stands outside Downing Street and she says, all you people are trying to ruin Brexit, but would you mind helping me out now because I've Brexit, clean Brexit, full Brexit.
Well, it doesn't. A compromise implies having to introduce ideas of a softer Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So you're going to be looking at a lot of the stuff that Labour want. Now we know, let's put Jeremy Corbyn aside for a minute if we can, but we know that people like Keir Starmer really favour Britain staying in the single market, would favour a compromise over freedom of movement as opposed to ending of freedom of movement entirely. So where does that kind of compromise come? But that's absolutely going to infuriate many of her backbenchers, enough backbenchers to bring her down. There is a cohort in the Conservative Party, a group of about 80 MPs who are part of this called this European Research Group, which used to be chaired by Steve Baker, who's now a Brexit minister, now chaired by Suella Fernandez. These MPs are all in this WhatsApp group and they are all ready to go to bring Theresa May down if they don't think she's going to deliver Brexit. This is the kind of game.
But has she got a choice? I mean, she has got a majority now with this deal with the DUP, so does she need to do this?
I think she absolutely does, but I mean, I totally take your point that it's a bit laughable to come out and say, you know, enemies are in Parliament, you must be with the Conservative Party in order to get your Brexit, and now reaching across the aisle saying, please help me. But I think the real criticism is what she originally did, thinking at any point that Brexit could be a one-party movement, that we were going to go through years of negotiations and bring this through without a single member of Parliament on the other side being relatively happy with it was absolute nonsense. It was going to create problems for 20 years. So my criticism is how opposed she was to compromise in the beginning.
OK, and the Telegraph, I think, picks up on the fact that it needs must, really, because there are all sorts of warnings from all the opposition parties that they're going to try and frustrate Brexit. There's the Great Repeal Bill, rather, that will be introduced on Thursday.
It's no longer the Great Repeal, but it's just called the Repeal Bill.
Oh, the Repeal Bill. It's not great anymore.
Which tells you all you need to know about the process.
The fact that could be frustrated by opposition parties adding loads of amendments. I mean, she has to do something, doesn't she? And is compromise such a bad thing when the nation is so divided over
You know what?
this
It's
issue?
absolutely not. But if you can't even... If you're having to negotiate and compromise with your own parliament, how are the negotiations in Brussels going to go? I mean, she's in a position now where she's going to have to take back some red lines she set out. I mean, the red line on having no ECJ involvement at all in the UK is pretty much going to have to go. We've seen that. There's enough majority in there.
Yeah, and that will be dangerous for her.
Euratom and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The Europeans are looking at this. I mean, Steve Baker used a phrase like blood in the water when he talked about a different kind of transitional period. The European negotiators are going to look at this and think, this is someone we can push around, who's got no real sort of strength at all. She's got no sense of sticking by her guns. This is going to be an absolute cakewalk for them.
So what does this mean for Theresa May's leadership? If you think that this is a bad idea, how long will she last, do you think?
Her leadership is certainly at risk, but I think it was at risk anyway, with or without this speech, with or without reaching out to Jeremy Corbyn and across the aisle. You know, losing the election in the way that she did was so incredibly damaging to her party, and I think let down many people throughout the UK who were just hoping for some kind of stability going into these Brexit negotiations, regardless of what party you support. She's in trouble anyway, I think, with or without
Will she be leader by Christmas?
Oh gosh, please don't ask me to make... the polls are always wrong. How can we... throw it over to Owen. What do you think?
Owen, leader by Christmas?
I think she's less likely to be leader by Christmas because of this speech. I think
Really?
what was keeping her in place was pushing forward with this hard Brexit, because she can claim that the European referendum was the mandate she had for that, and I think the support of the party would keep her in place. I think this has weakened her position in the party. I really do. I think there's going to be a lot of
But what
angry
if the gamble...
there.
OK, I take that point, but what if the gamble does pay off? And what if Labour has to come forward and actually go along with things like leaving the ECJ and go along with ending the freedom of movement? Actually, that can make some of her backbenchers and her Brexit minister and David Davis and the like, all of them, quite happy. So I agree with you that it looks weak, but if it pays off, then it pays off. That could. You don't think it will?
OK, let's bring it. You've packed this front half with lots of stories, so let's try and get on to some of the other ones. At the bottom of the Telegraph there was the next thing that you wanted to talk about. European Parliament rejects Britain's damp squib, in inverted commas, offer on citizens' rights. Yeah,
and I'm going to do a complete 180 here. I think the offer on citizens' rights from Theresa May was actually quite sensible, because what it did, there's a discrepancy. European citizens have got more rights at the moment in Britain than British citizens when it comes to things like bringing over spouses. They haven't got to meet the minimum income requirement. One of the things that Theresa May did was equalise that. Now, whether or not you disagree with the policy about having income requirements is kind of a separate issue. But actually, this was giving them the same rights as Britons. The stuff about not voting in local elections, I think, was ridiculous. I don't know why they got rid of that. People pay their taxes, they should have a vote in local elections. There's some stuff there, but I think to reject this as a damp squib offer, I think Europeans are being going a bit over the top here. I think the offer actually was quite fair. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but I think it was actually quite a fair offer to you citizens.
I think she's between a rock and a hard place when it comes to that right to vote in local elections, because all of the polling showed afterwards that, yes, Brexit was in large part about immigration, but the main issue for people was about sovereignty. And I think that idea that somebody who isn't from the UK, who isn't a citizen, having the right to vote is actually something she's probably very aware of, which explains why she's pushing this, even if it doesn't make sense.
They couldn't vote in general elections anyway. It was only local elections.
Sure.
It's basically where your council...
But I think that is still a deep frustration to many people who will have voted for Brexit. And I think this story is also highlighting that issue of EU citizens' rights and freedom of movement cannot be separated. When it comes to issues like spouses being able to come over on minimum incomes, we're already getting into those hefty Brexit negotiations, which is why her speech really is timely, regardless of the content in it.
And we saw that a number of the front pages are dominated by this reboot by Theresa May. The other story that's taking up a lot of front pages is the latest developments in the case of baby Charlie Gard. The Metro's lead story there, Our Right to Give Charlie a Chance, and it's a similar picture on the front of the Mirror. Our Charlie's still fighting, and so are we, and the Sun as well. Give our Charlie a miracle.
Yes, the family's going to the High Court again tomorrow, hoping to repeal this again. So far, they have not had success. It's a horrible story. I mean, depressing any way you look at it. We cannot know all the evidence that the court saw. You know, I can't make a specific judgment on that, but I am really uncomfortable with the decisions that have been made so far, just based on what we know. There's medical advice over in the United States and doctors reaching out saying that they think that they can help Charlie. And I think if Charlie were a few years older, able to say his name, able to say things like, I want to go to school, I want to be well, I think that 10% chance that they estimate he has would impact very differently on all of us. And I do hope he's given the chance. I personally do.
It's such a difficult case, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, this is sort of philosophical questions here, isn't it? But I do think that, I mean, the kind of tone of the headline said it right. It's give us a chance. It's our right. It's all this kind of stuff. And I think they are completely right to say that. Obviously, we don't know what the courts are seeing. It's very difficult for us to say. We're just seeing it through these sort of lenses. But I think it would be hard for any parent, knowing that there was a chance, however small, to make your baby better, as opposed to them dying.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think anyone would do anything for that chance, wouldn't they? And I think that it seems that the public opinion now is very much with this. Not that that should have any sway particularly, but it does seem that there is acceptance now that this baby should be offered whatever chance they can get.
Parents have just done everything that they can. They've raised the money independently. This is not going to be state funded. They've been reaching out and they have found doctors who are saying objectively and publicly, we think we can help. And for that to be denied, I think is going to have a huge impact. Well, I mean, I can't even imagine the impact on the parents, but on all of us, really.
Yeah, so very interesting to see what happens at the High Court tomorrow. We are going to take a break. Lots more to talk about after the break, including the Iraqi army achieving monumental success in Mosul. That's coming up. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight, Owen Bennett, Deputy Political Editor of the HuffPost UK, and Kate Andrews, News Editor at the Institute of Economic Affairs. We're going to turn our attention to Iraq for this section because claims that Mosul has been liberated from IS after a very long fight.
Yes, so this story's been in the news for a few days, but Iraq's Prime Minister has now flown to Mosul in an attempt to really show that the city has been taken back. It has been a horrific process in getting there. A quote from the New York Times, actually, is that it was the toughest urban warfare since World War II. And the statistics around it are absolutely staggering. The tactics that ISIS were using on the ground, using children and women as shields, is all coming through more and more now that things are settling down. We're getting some of those horrible realizations, but it is overall positive news, of course. Close to 1 million refugees have had to flee. Hopefully, at some point, they'll really be focusing on rebuilding the city. And with ISIS on the defense, the threat is not gone. They're still very concerned about sleeper cells and smaller terrorist attacks happening in blips, but overall, this is a victory.
Well, that's right, and it was the city that the IS declared as their de facto capital of their caliphate, wasn't it? So it's symbolically hugely important, and a number of the other front pages do reflect it, at least with photographs on their front pages. Exactly,
and what was wrong was the way that it was taken 3 years ago. It was seen, it's just to show that the Iraqi army isn't ready to defend itself yet, because it was seen that they took it over relatively easily. And the fact that the Iraqi army have come back, and yes, they've had support from coalition in the air through airstrikes, but the fact that it's been very much the Iraqi army doing it, it's the Iraqi flag, it's all that kind of stuff. This is not another Western-led intervention in the Middle East, even though they've had support from Western countries through airstrikes, like I said, is a positive sort of propaganda tool, if you like, that it shows that actually the Iraqi state now is beginning to get its strength back. But part of me thinks that perhaps the West should have been there a little bit to help, because this is the front line against. This is not just a little civil war. This is the front line against a completely different ideology who wants to sweep across Western Europe.
That's a very important point, and a lot has been flagged up over the past few years about the difference in tactics between the Obama-led coalition and the Trump-led coalition. A lot of criticism of Trump changing tactics and going much more forcefully into Mosul. It was showing that there were more casualties because of it, but also it's thought that the change in tactics led to this victory. And so, again, moral conundrums left, right and centre, but overall a victory.
And it's pictured on the front of the FT as well, but we're going to move on to another story that's also on the front of the FT, and it's this one down at the bottom. It'll pay to be posh when the next phase of robot revolution takes off. What's that?
Yeah, this is not just because of like some sort of C-3PO kind of posh accent. They're basically saying that the kind of things that you get inherently from being posh, greater social networking abilities, a kind of confidence, better communication. You can tell I'm not posh because I constantly stumble over my words. These are things which robots can't replace, and it's saying these will give you the advantage. So when the robots come and they take over, you know, bookkeepers and payroll managers and wage clerks and that kind of stuff, the posh ones will survive. I mean, the other way you can look at it is the fact that it just shows that this country is still such an old boys club that actually that even robots couldn't displace this kind of absolutely ridiculous system we have in this country.
That's not positive, yeah. But certainly actually a very good point. There's a lot of disagreement on this, though. I think it's the OECD thinks that roughly 10% of jobs could be lost due to automation. But we're already seeing those kinds of jobs that they're going to be in manufacturing. Over in the States, it was a big part of Trump's election. He was blaming automation, or he was blaming the loss of jobs on immigration. Really, we know it was automation. But there are other people out there who are predicting that it's going to be far greater than that, that actually many of these posh jobs could be automated. Things like GPs and solicitors, where a lot of it is box ticking, you know, going through, do you do X, do you do Y, what information do I need here and there? And it's the people who are in creative industries, artists or barristers on the other side of law, that may have a better shot at keeping their jobs away from robots. I can't imagine what that world's going to look like. It's, you know, it's
I'm just wondering whether it's too late to retrain.
Yeah, Terminator.
Yeah, negative.
OK, let's just turn to the front of the Telegraph because there is a story that's not very big about library books. There it is.
It's 5 years too late to return a library book. Yes, Jane, it is. So move on. I mean, I don't know what this is about. It's nonsense, right? Yes, it is. It's too late to return a library book. But
you know what I like about this story? I think the story's...
Nothing.
No, I do.
The library's still open.
It speaks to all of us, because who hasn't returned that booklet and felt that overwhelming anxiety of how much trouble you're going to be in? Like, I know I have. I know I have. It speaks to
anxiety. What are you talking about?
Like deep fear when that library book is late and you've done something horribly wrong. Like
what, to the book?
Yeah, when I was a kid at school and I returned it later, even as an adult taking out from the library or something, like I would get very concerned if it was late.
Wow.
So she's really spoken to me in this headline.
I wonder how big the fine would be.
Well, like a tenner.
I would have turned to page
Surely
14
they charge
now.
you for the book at this point.
Probably less than they paid it for this article.
Oh, and this is a moral conundrum.
It's not a moral conundrum.
It's
not. This is ridiculous.
No,
OK, in that case, let's move on then, shall we? And some fantastic pictures there in the Express of the Lake District, which has now won UNESCO World Heritage status. Is that what it's called?
Yes. It's up there with Taj Mahal, Great Barrier Reef and Stonehenge. And it's wonderful to recognise that we have this fantastic topography in Britain. And I guess post-Brexit, one of the industries we're going to be really looking to develop, I guess, is tourism. So I think this is great that we've got these things here. I think there's suggestions that the status that Liverpool Docks have got might be rescinded by UNESCO. So we've got one to sort of replace it if that was the case. But I think this is great, and it shows, you know, that we've got plenty to offer in this country, and you know, we've got a good tourism thing here. And
I think that a huge number of tourists do go to the Lake District already, but the hope is that this kind of status will boost those numbers even further and bring real wealth to the area.
Absolutely. Already £1 billion a year coming in tourism to the Lake District alone, creating over 16,000 jobs. So, you know, if the robots aren't taking those jobs, as we said before, then there we go. That's another positive.
And rather inspiring as we all think about holidays into the summer. Kate and Owen, great to see you both, and you will be back in at 11:30. So see you then. Thank you very much.